Again, taking turn to Psalms 23 tonight.
They've already gone.
I know it wasn't mentioned earlier, but we do have several prayer requests that we need to continue to pray about. I was supposed to preach in Greensboro Monday night for a 40th anniversary celebration for the North Greensboro Church of God. And Monday morning about 5:30, well, I got sick as a dog. I haven't been that sick in 20 years. I don't ever get sick, but it was awful. And to say the least, I didn't move much from my bed to the couch and back to the bed on Monday. Then Tuesday, I got a phone call early from Matthew that Brenda had been up since 2 o'clock Tuesday morning with the same mess. So went back home Tuesday, and then Tuesday afternoon, Troy called me, and well, he'd been up since 2 o'clock with the same mess. And he was telling me about Nathan and about Shannon. And Nathan had been up, went to the hospital, thought he had food poisoning with the same mess. And also that Shannon was at the hospital having surgery for DNC. She had lost the baby on Monday. So we don't know exactly what caused all of this. I don't think we were all drinking out of the same bottle of water. But from looking at the crowd tonight, there may be some other people that may have contracted whatever we got. So just keep that all in prayer, and especially Shannon. I talked to her today. She seems to be doing fine, but still, that's devastating. My daughter went through the same thing, and it's a devastating thing to happen. So keep her in prayer, and Nathan too, for that matter. Nathan was getting a little better, but he was still feeling pretty rough. One of the benefits of being a Christian and part of the local body of believers, and that's why I don't go along with this idea that I can go to heaven and not go to church, because part of being part of the body of Christ is being part of the body of Christ.
Right.
And if I don't like to go to church, I definitely ain't going to want to go to heaven, because heaven's just going to be a church service. So one of the benefits of being part of the body of Christ is how that we help one another. We celebrate with one another, and we bear one another's burdens.
Yes.
And so therefore, please just keep these in mind, and especially, like I said, it's more than likely than not that there's others that have this same 24-hour bug that
Yes.
several of us have had, and that may be why they're not here tonight. Again, let's look at Psalm 23. Let's read it in its entirety, the 6 verses that are here. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Amen.
Look at verse 3. He restoreth my soul.
Yes.
Father, we are simply amazed at how good you are to us. Every single day you load us down with your benefits. You forgive all our diseases, or you forgive all our iniquities, and you heal all our diseases.
Yes.
You crown our life with loving kindness and tender mercy. You satisfy our mouth with good things. You bless us beyond anything that we've ever deserved, and we thank you so much for that tonight, Lord. And we thank you for the promises of your word. And we thank you for the insights of this shepherd. It shares with us your attitude and your heart towards yours. Draw us close to you tonight by your Spirit through your word. In Jesus' name we pray, and amen.
Amen.
when you really look at verse 3, that first few words there, he restoreth my soul, it would seem to be almost contrary-wise to what's been said already. Because you would make assumption that anybody's in the care of the Good Shepherd could never come to the point where they are so distressed in soul as to need restoration.
Right.
I mean, if the Lord is my shepherd, if I belong to Him, and if He is taking care of my needs, and He's leading me by the still waters and providing a peaceful environment in my heart, maybe not in my life, but in my heart, it would seem almost contrary to say the words, He restoreth my soul. Because how in the world can my soul need to be restored if I'm in His care? But we have to be honest. The fact remains that it does happen.
Right.
Even David, the author of this psalm, knew what it was to be cast down and dejected.
Yes.
He had tasted defeat in his life. He had felt the frustration of having fallen under temptation. He was acquainted with the bitterness of feeling hopeless and without strength. In fact, in Psalm 42, he cried out, "Why art thou cast down, O my soul? Why art thou disquieted within me? Hope thou in God." And I can just about guarantee it, if you've been saved over, let's say, a couple of hours, you already know what it is to even be in the care of the shepherd.
Right.
To sometimes feel down, discouraged, dejected, rejected, depressed, feel isolated, all alone, feel like nothing's going right and there's no one there to help. Even though you know you belong to Him and you know He's taking care of you, you still have those feelings of being cast down. You see, one of the grand things about Him being our shepherd is that only those that are intimately acquainted with sheep and their habits understand the significance of a cast down sheep. See, this word cast is an old English term for a sheep that is turned over on its back and it cannot get turned up right again by itself. A cast sheep is I guess in the best way of saying it is simply a pathetic sight. It's lying on its back, its feet are in the air, and it flays away frantically trying to get turned back upright to stand up, but it never is successful. I guess the best way, if you've never seen a sheep like that, to describe that, you ever seen a cockroach like that? It's been turned over its back and it's flailing and it never gets turned back over. Now, some kind of cockroaches are able to do it, but others are never able to turn back over. And so it is with a sheep. When it gets turned over on its back many times, it can't get back on its feet. And when you think about it, if the owner of that sheep doesn't arrive in the right amount of time, the sheep will die like that.
Right.
That's why it's so essential for the care of a shepherd to look over his flock, counting them to see that all are able to rise to their feet and walk. Because you see, it's not only the shepherd who keeps an eye out for lost sheep, but it's also the predators that do. Buzzards, vultures, dogs, coyotes, cougars all know that a cast sheep is easy prey and death is not far off. I don't know if you can picture that in your mind, but that is so a dangerous situation.
Yes.
Here's how it happens. A heavy, fat, or long-fleeced sheep will lie down comfortably in a little hollow or depression in the ground. It may roll on its side slightly to stretch out or relax, and then suddenly the center of gravity in the body shifts so that it turns on its back far enough that the feet no longer touch the ground. It may feel a sense of panic and start to crawl frantically, and frequently this only makes matters worse. It rolls over even further, and it becomes impossible for it to regain its feet. As it lies there struggling, gases begin to build up in the rumen, and these expand, and they tend to retard and cut off the blood of circulation to the extremities, especially the legs. And if the weather is very hot and sunny, a cast sheep can die in just a few hours. If it's cool and rainy, it may survive for several days in this same position. Yes. But it will ultimately die unless restored by the shepherd. Now, when we talk about us as his sheep, we too have to be realistic about our lives and face the facts as they really are. Most of us, though we belong to Christ and desire to be under his control and endeavor to allow ourselves to be led by him, do on occasion find ourselves cast down. All of us. In fact, we discover that often when we are most sure of ourselves, we stumble and fall. That's why Paul, when he wrote to the church at Corinth, warned them, wherefore let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. Yes. It's sometimes when we seem to be flourishing in our faith, we find ourselves in the situation of utter frustration and futility, and we stumble and fall. And as it is with sheep, so it is with Christians. There are some basic principles that apply to all of this. Well, what are they? Well, just like sheep, it's this idea or this desire of looking for a soft spot. Man, that'll preach. Yeah. Sheep that choose the comfortable, the soft, the rounded hollows in the ground in which to lie down very often become cast. In such situations, it is easy for them to roll over on their backs. And therefore it is in the Christian life, there's great danger in always looking for, quote, the easy place. Yes. The cozy corner. Yes. The comfortable position. Yes. Where there's no hardship, no need for endurance, and no demand for self-sacrifice. I can only speak from my perspective. I'll enjoin Brother Troy's without asking him, but I'm sure he'll agree with what I'm about to say. Being a preacher in our denomination, we have both seen, quote, men of God that have always wanted to find the easy place, the comfortable place. And if they're not there, that's what they're looking for. We have to be honest, and I'm sure I've said this before. There are some that ministry to them is an easy job because, well, they just don't work. Right. It's a place where they can draw a salary and not do a whole lot. And that's quite evident when you're with them or around them or one of their members. I have been surrounded by people after preaching at certain churches, and they would come up to me and say, "We're so glad you're here. We're starving to death." And that pastor had been there for quite a while. And what made it so terrible is just before I preached, this pastor would share with me while Sunday school was going on, "Yeah, I usually get my sermons up during Sunday school." Yeah. And I can tell why your people are starving to death too. The easy place, the comfortable place. There's no hardship, no self-sacrifice place that a lot of children of God are looking for. And yet when we look at the Christ life, the example that's set before us, we understand that in order to follow Jesus, we must on a daily basis deny ourselves and take up a cross. Right. Now, I don't know if you understand what that literally means, but that means every day is an experience of dying to ourselves. Yes. The cross was a cruel form of death. It was a slow, agonizing death. Yes. Jesus chose to go there, and he said those that would follow him would go there also. Paul said, "I crucify myself, my flesh, on a daily basis." That's not a comfortable thing to do. Right. but it's a choice that you make. And there are just so many that are the sheep of the Lord that are just looking for an easy way out. You know, my brother-in-laws used to refer to it as, you need to wear a white hat. Why? Because you're a Dodge boy. Because if you remember back, I guess, in the 50s and 60s, the Dodge boys always wore those white hats. Well, what's a Dodge boy? Somebody's always dodging work. Now, I'll bring Sister Wilhelm into it. She worked on a job for the state, and she had somebody that worked with her that was a Dodge girl. Whenever there was work to be done, she seemed to get lost somewhere because she didn't want to work. And for some reason, it seems like there's a lot of people that think work is a four-letter word, meaning that it's a bad word. And so therefore, she kept getting lost. She finally lost her job because there's a lot of people that don't want to engage in any kind of hard labor. The only problem is that these sheep that would always look for the easy, soft place put themselves in more danger than anyone else. It was a detriment to their own life. And Christians that are always looking for that easy place, that place of no sacrifice. Let me put it like this. There are those individuals that are visiting a lot of different churches that are looking for a place that they don't have to give anything. But there's a ministry for my children, there's a ministry for my parents, there's a ministry for me, there's a ministry for this, and they give us this, and they do this for us, but I don't have to do anything. I don't have to pay tithes, I don't have to attend, but every once in a while, and I can be entertained, and I can get what I want, get what I need, but there's no accountability on my behalf at all. That's why a lot of these, quote, mega churches become mega churches, because people can get lost in those churches. And they can come every once in a while, and they can have their conscience assured and pleased, and never, ever, ever follow Jesus. They just go for that easy spot. And they put their lives in mortal spiritual danger. See, when that happens, we put ourselves in a very, very dangerous place. When we think we got it made, it's when we find ourselves in the greatest danger. If you remember, when did David get in trouble with Bathsheba? What was the context of that setting? I mean, it just didn't happen in a vacuum. There was a context. There was a situation that brought this all about.
Yes.
The scripture says that when kings went forth to battle, David tarried still in Jerusalem.
Right.
Now, David was a warrior. He had killed giants. He had slew his 10,000s. He was a man that knew how to fight the enemy and win. But at this particular time, when it was his responsibility to go out to the battlefront and engage the enemy, David chose the soft place, the easy place. And it was while he was there in Jerusalem that he saw Bathsheba. And lust was conceived. And he sinned. And then he sinned again to cover up that sin. You see, we have to be very careful when God calls us to a responsibility, to something that's a hardship sometimes, something that, again, that causes us not to be in an easy place or in a soft place when we would rather, especially our flesh, would choose not to do it. That when we refuse to do it and go for the easy place or the soft place and no place of self-sacrifice, we put ourselves in a very dangerous place to be cast. David was cast, and it almost cost him not only his kingdom, but his life. Thank God for God's grace and his mercy and his forgiveness. But that sin cost him a lot. It cost him his family, basically. So therefore, looking for the soft spot, the easy place, is a place where we can find ourselves cast and in mortal danger. Secondly, there's this aspect of having too much wool. Often when the fleece becomes very long and heavily matted with mud or manure, birds, and other debris, it's much easier for the sheep to become cast, literally weighed down with its own wool. If you look back in the Old Testament, you find out that wool in Scripture depicts demonstrates the old self-life in the Christian life. It's an outward expression of an inward attitude. That assertion of my own desire and hopes and aspirations and not God. It's the area of my life in which and through which I am continually in contact with the world around me. It speaks of us clinging and accumulating things and possessions and ideas that simply begin to weigh me down, drag me down, and hold me down. Again, looking at the Old Testament economy of the priests when they would minister before the Lord, the high priest was never allowed to wear wool when he entered into the Holy of Holies because it spoke of pride and personal preference instead of God's will, and God would not tolerate it. And the best thing to do when a sheep's wool became too heavy, the shepherd would take it and shear it clean. You ever heard somebody say he sheared some sheep this morning? Well, that's what that shepherd would do to a sheep. Well, that was just too weighed down by its own wool. And by doing so, he saved that sheep's life. And I don't know if you've ever watched it happen. I don't know if you've ever seen a shepherd ever shear a sheep. It's not a pleasant sight. The sheep butts against it because it's not comfortable at all. If you've ever taken a 3-year-old to get his first haircut, you've seen him cry and squirm and do everything else. Well, that's the way a sheep acts when it's getting shorn. And so therefore, it is a struggle for that shepherd to shear that sheep. They have to fight with them and struggle with them. So it's a very arduous task. Neither one of them enjoy the fact of getting shorn. Not the sheep, not the shepherd. It's just it's not a good experience. But the shepherd knows that if he doesn't shear that sheep, what's ultimately going to happen to that sheep, it's going to be cast by its own weight and cost it its life. Isn't that the way the Father does with us? When we find that there are some things in our life that just simply need to be cut away. Yes. I want to tell you what, if we're honest, when God deals with us in those times, it's not a pleasant experience whatsoever. Not at all. That's right. You see, how do I put this so that you'll understand what I'm saying and not confuse it? If somebody were to take something from you that didn't mean a whole lot in the first place, something that you would have probably given away at a yard sale anyway, what have you lost? Not a whole lot. But if somebody were to steal from you something that's very precious that you really like and really love and really want in your life, man, that would hurt bad. And when God has to shear us from things that are bad for us that we want, that we got attached to, that's basically part of who we are, I mean, that's their wool. It's just gotten too heavy. It's attached to them, but it's causing problems. It's weighting them down. And the shepherd says, I need to take that off. Well, Lord, that's going to hurt. I don't want you to do that. Can't you do something else besides taking that? That's part of me, Lord. You see, if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? If living for the Lord was an easy experience and, oh my goodness, don't let me use the wrong, a joyous experience all the time to where all you wanted to do was shout, everybody would live for the Lord. You know, put it like this, if the name it, claim it, grab it crowd were correct, of course everybody want to follow Jesus then. Yeah, if I'm going to get rich and I ain't never going to get sick, sign me up. I mean, if I can have everything I want, if I can just say it, it automatically happens, which is occultic at its very basis anyway. I mean, everybody's going to want that, right? Why wouldn't I want to follow that Jesus? But when they find out that that ain't the Jesus of the book, and that's not real life Christianity, and bad things do happen to good people, and people that have faith do get sick, and people that have faith are not rich, and life is a life of self-sacrifice for living for the Lord. Oh my goodness, I don't want that. I mean, that's why Jesus, in John chapter 6, the crowds left him. And he looked at his own and he said, are you going to leave me too? And so therefore, a lot of times what God will require of us is to take something out of our heart and out of our life that we really like and want, and it's just weighing us down. That's why we're told to lay aside every weight. Right. And the sin which so easily besets us. And to lay aside means to put it down and never go back to it. And sometimes God will take that away from you, and sometimes it's a work of grace in your life where God gives you the grace every day to allow it to lay. He has to shear the sheep sometimes from that heavy wool so that they won't be cast. Again, we're talking about avoiding spiritual death. There's another reason that a sheep will be cast. You're going to like this one. It's because they just get simply too fat. Let me give you some free medical advice. I'm not a doctor, and I don't play one on television either. But I think I pointed this out before. My sister's a nurse. My son is a nurse. My daughter is a nurse. My daughter-in-law is a nurse. My niece is a nurse. And I've got other people in the peripheral of my family that are nurses. They're all nurses, not doctors. Well, I got another niece that's a nurse, yeah. So I got a lot of medical advice around me all the time. And with Brenda's medical problems, with diabetes and insulin and all that good stuff, I've got a good education on some things. Now, I don't pretend to know anything like a nurse or a doctor does, but I've got a basic understanding of some things. And you know what I figured out real quick a long time ago? Being fat is detrimental to your health. It really is. And there's a whole lot of problems that are solved when you simply lose weight. Yes. Whole lot of problems. A plethora of problems are solved when you simply lose weight. And there's a whole lot of problems that are gained when you gain weight. And I've seen people on both sides of the fence. I had a good friend that pastored down in Mississippi for years. He was originally from Statesville, pastored in Mississippi for years. And what he would do, he'd go on these crash diets. And he'd lose 60 pounds at a time. And then he'd put on 80. And then he'd lose 60. And then he'd put on 100. And then he'd lose 60. And then he'd put on 40. And the doctor told him, if you keep doing this, you're going to die. Guess what? He died. Because he kept doing it. You can't do that with your health. You can't keep playing around with it. And see, one of the biggest problems that sheep had were they simply became overweight. It's funny. I guess I've been there too. What you want is you want a magic pill. You want a magic diet. You want a magic exercise. And guess what the magic is? Anybody want to know? I'll give you a great plan on how to lose weight. Quit eating and exercise. Wow, we ought to sell all kinds of videos on that. Quit eating and exercise. That's how you lose weight. There's no other way to circumvent the problem. And so therefore, when a sheep became overweight, guess what? He became not too healthy and not too productive. And it was the fattest of the sheep that most often were cast. Their weight simply made it harder for them to be agile and nimble on their feet. And so once a shepherd noticed that a sheep was becoming overweight, you know what he would do? He would put him on a rigorous ration of exercise and also a different diet. It was his aim to always make sure that his sheep were strong and energetic and not fat and weak. And turning to the Christian life, we are confronted with the same problem. There are people that have done well in business or home life who feel that they are flourishing or have arrived. They may have a sense of well-being and self-assurance. And they find out that the fat has weighted them down to the point to where they are most prone to fall. Material success, listen to me, material success is never a measure of spiritual health.
Right.
Never.
Right.
I'm so sick of this prosperity lie.
Amen.
If you got faith, you'll get rich. Okay, I guess Jesus missed it, and I guess Paul missed it, and I guess the rest of the disciples missed it.
Right.
Material success is never a measure of spiritual health, nor is an apparent affluence any kind of criteria for real godliness. If our shepherd sees us getting fat, he may impose on us some sort of diet or discipline, which we might find rough, but it will be for our own good. Hebrews chapter 12, we read about how God chooses to discipline those he loves.
Right.
But the truth of that is that afterward it always produces a life of peace and holiness. And it'll keep us from being cast down. See, this is the thing. This is the whole crux of these words in verse 3. He restoreth my soul. Is that it's always the shepherd's desire what's best for us. Think about it for just a minute. It's always God's desire for what's best for us. Why do you think the Ten Commandments were ever given? Just because it was best for him? I mean, really, when you steal something from somebody else, does that really injure God? Of course it offends his holiness, but does that bring any injury to God? You're not stealing anything from him. I mean, it all belongs to him anyway. When someone commits adultery, are you really offending God? You are offending his holiness, his moral word, but I mean, in all reality, you're not cheating on him. If you commit murder, you're not taking a life from God. You're doing it to somebody else. When you covet, when you lie, of course, again, you're offending his holiness, but you're not really doing it against him directly. Of course, indirectly, always. There are 4 verses there, well, 3 in all reality, that have direct reference with our relationship with God. The 4th is with our parents, and the other 6 deal with how we treat one another. So in all reality, he gave these 10 commandments for our own good.
Right.
He was trying to help us out. Well, they're just rules, and they block me in, and they lock me in into a particular behavior that I don't like, but they're for our own good.
Right.
He didn't give them because he didn't have anything else to do, and he thought one day, arbitrarily, let me just do something to quench all their fun in life. Just like the shepherd and his sheep. He watches out for them for their own good.
Yes, he does.
Again, sheep are so dumb, they don't have enough sense to get out of the rain. And because, well, they might get too fat, they might get their wool too heavy, they might be looking for the easy place. God's not trying, the shepherd's not trying to keep them from the, quote, easy place because he doesn't want them having an easy place, or he doesn't shear them because he doesn't want them just to have too much wool, and he doesn't put them on that rigorous routine just because he doesn't want them overweight. He knows the perils of those things.
Yes.
That they're dangerous for the life of that sheep. And here's the difference too with some people's perspective about the shepherd and about God himself. His aim is that sheep be restored.
Yes.
He's not looking for that sheep so that he can punish that sheep.
Right.
He's looking for that sheep so that he might restore that sheep. In Luke, we hear the story Jesus shares, and he compares this to our Father. That a shepherd leaves the 99 that goes out looking for that one lost may not think that one lost sheep is important unless that one lost sheep is you
Right.
or one of your children.
Right.
And see, so many times we maybe been taught or maybe just confused the ideas or maybe even believed for a long time that God's going to get me. If I do that, God's going to get me. If I fall into that, then God's going to get me. Somehow, some way, God's going to get me. I tell you what, Brother Troy, when Matthew was first diagnosed, I struggled for a long time in my own heart. This is happening because of something you did or something you didn't do. If you'd have prayed more, if you'd have studied more, if you'd have preached better, if you'd have done this, or if you hadn't have done that, if you hadn't have said that, this wouldn't have been happening to your son. And I dealt with that for a while. And then I understood the reality that that's just a lie of the devil.
Right.
That God is never going to guilt anybody into living right. Because guilting people into doing things is simply manipulative and it's from hell. God never tries to guilt us into loving Him or behaving for Him.
Right.
That's why the law was not able to save us. Because all the law does is point out how sinful we are. And yet our Father gives us the law for our own good and said, if you do these things, life will be good. If you don't, it won't. But you continue to break this, so I'm going to send a better solution than just telling you what to do and what not to do. I'm going to send the chief shepherd that while you're cast, while you're flailing in life, while you're dying, I'm going to send somebody to restore you, to save you, to deliver you. Because you see that sheep, once it's cast, it can't help itself. It's simply a victim that will suddenly die. And you know what? None of us have the ability, even though we may hear the shepherd's voice, we don't have the ability to set ourselves upright and make our way back. No. He has to come for us. Thank God Jesus came. Thank God that He came in such a way that there's no misunderstanding the very grace of God. That sometimes when we hear the lies of the devil, that God is disgusted, that He's fed up with us, that He's even furious with us. No. Again, it's that simple revelation that Jesus gave to that crowd that day. He's that good shepherd that comes for one and brings us home and restores us. I remember back, it's been several years ago when I was preaching for Steve Adams. And I think it was out of John chapter 1. I preached on the God of the pursuit. And I thank the Lord tonight that He is the God of the pursuit.
Yes.
He comes after us.
Oh, yes.
Because we don't even have the ability to go for Him.
Yes.
When we're cast down, disquieted, when life overwhelms us, when we're turned upside down, when we can't get turned right back up.
Yes. He
comes to us.
Right.
And He restores our soul.
Yes.
Stand to your feet tonight. I thank you so much, Father,
Thank you, Jesus.
for that divine